Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where it looks like Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney are both going to take a gap year before doing their rematch. Boxing can be a crazy sport sometimes, right? And I think the last few days are proof of that. So let's kind of summarize where we're at. Ryan Garcia has received a 1-year ban, which is likely going to be backdated to the date he failed the test, right? So he's probably not going to fight now till about Easter next year. Devin has basically said he's not going to fight for a year. And so he's relinquished his belts, and it seems these two guys are going to rematch next year. And if we're being honest, that will be the biggest fight of 2025. I don't doubt that for a second. I don't know if that's good for boxing or not, but we're a sport where we don't really care about things like doping, and we don't care about things like cheating. We just care about people fighting each other. Let's be brutally honest about that. Because if you look at this is a mess from top to toe. So it turns out that in addition to the VADA test, Ryan Garcia failed a test for Ostarine under the auspices of the New York State Athletic Commission. But the strange thing was they didn't test for Ostarine until VADA found it. Then they went back and said, actually, let's go and test for this. And I said this, if you remember, I said this during the Conor Benn situation. I said, the problem with accepting VADA is that UCAD and all the other anti-doping bodies have to admit what they've been doing is substandard. Pause for a second. Now ask yourself, wouldn't you love VADA to take all the historic samples from all the Olympic Games, 2008, Bolt's remarkable tournament, 2012. Let's go back to all of those tournaments and retest those samples under VADA. We would be surprised at what would come out. They would never allow that. So what we know for certain now is the USADA or whoever it is that does the testing in America is at a level below VADA. And they will never accept VADA because it will force them to up their levels, and they'd have to pay for the tests. Because it looks like there are various tiers of testing you can do. And if you look at UCAD or USADA, it seems they try and get away with the bare minimum, just so they can say they tested someone, and you've got to be really reckless to fail one of their tests, right? And they'll tell you that. You've got to be reckless. You've literally just got to be just injecting steroids as soon as the tester walks into the room. And that's why you've got UCAD and Adams and this and that. And they try and sugarcoat it with all these acronyms to make you feel it's a serious operation. But you don't realize how irrelevant an operation it is until VADA show up. So Ryan is now boxed off until next year. And that's good. He coughed to it. He did his deal. Maybe Conor Benn should have done this, and he left. But let's just look at where that leaves everything. That leaves everything in a mess. So firstly, we're delaying this kind of Four Kings era, the Teo, Devin, Ryan, and Tank era, right? We're delaying this. Yeah, you can slot in guys like Shakur, maybe Keyshawn Davis if he can step up. You can insert those guys, but we know who the four are, and we want them to fight each other. A fight between Haney and Teo would have been good as a bridger while we wait for Ryan, and then the winner maybe faces Tank. Then Ryan comes back and he gets back in the mix. It doesn't seem we're going to get that now. So that's a lot of money down the toilet. That's a lot of potential boxing growth on pause. And that's a real shame. So 140 is going to be a bit stagnant now, but it also, I guess, it gives Tank legitimacy in staying at 135 for a bit, and he can clean up. So he's going to enhance his legacy while these two are having their gap year. So you look at that, and then you look at almost the deterioration of Devin Haney's brand. People weren't happy with how he took the loss, and people weren't happy with how he reacted to the doping, although, to be fair, if someone took drugs to fight you, you have every right to be upset. And then I think he was equally as hurt when Matchroom didn't bid for the Sandor Martin fight. And I think that made Devin realize he was just a pawn to Eddie Hearn. A lot of us who've been in the sport long enough understand who and what Eddie Hearn is. And that was the moment Devin realized. And look, everyone's going to sit there and go, well, I want to pay that money for Haney versus Martin anyway. Okay. Cool. But it wasn't like Hearn was offering him anything better than that. So Bob bids on that. Now Haney's like, I fight this Sandro Martin guy that I don't particularly care about for virtually no money. Let me just slide out for a bit. Go and focus on me. Because Sandro Martin's a hard fight. It's a horrible fight, not an enjoyable fight. He's not great to watch. He's basically just a Spanish Jack Catterall. Terrible to watch. Wouldn't pay a penny to watch him box. But all of that delay means he's messed the money up for Jack Catterall. So Jack Catterall's going to fight Regis Prograis. I don't know where those guys are ranked in the WBC, but God forbid they make that for the vacant title. See, I don't believe Prograis is a top 10 super lightweight on the WBC scale. He can't be, man. He's had a terrible run. But Catterall has to be. And so what do? Do you say Prograis had an injury and bring in Sandro Martin so Catterall can get the belt, then make the fight happen with Prograis afterwards? Or do you allow Prograis Catterall to happen for commercial reasons, and in parallel, you position one of your guys, maybe Richardson, Hitchens, who else would be up there? Dalton Smith has a silver belt, right? So, just thinking out loud here. So do you put Dalton Smith in for the belt, but you have to find an American for Dalton Smith to fight? And the only one I can think of is Gary Antoine Russell. Winnable fight for Dalton Smith, in my opinion. So is that what Hearn does? Finds one of his stable to secure that WBC belt, let Prograis and Catterall do their bit, and then bring it back together for a British world title fight. If he does that, then, I mean, he would have cemented his reputation as a damn good promoter. But that's the mayhem now at 140 pounds. We've talked about the problems we now got with doping, where boxing fans now don't trust UCAD, USADA, whoever, because we now know they're an inferior product. Haney throwing the belt in the bin, essentially, has opened up opportunities for a lot of Brits to contest the belt, which is good. And it kind of makes folly of the management of Adam Azim so far, because it would have been good for him to have been in and amongst that ranking. But, you know, you never know how the clock ticks in life. So let's now zero in on Ryan Garcia. He's out for a year. No belts, no nothing. Knowing him, he won't fight at 140 again. He might become like Haney, just be a tweener where he just picks weights where he's comfortable and he fights. Could be 147, could be 144, and make these entertaining fights. But the higher up these guys go, the harder it is for them to make the Tank fight, because Tank will only do it at 140. But you worry about Ryan now, don't you? All that time on his hands, no money coming in unless he finds, a way to YouTube his existence now. But no purses, no boxing, no focus. What's he going to do? Now he's already back on that whole Diddy thing, and Devin is this and Devin is that, calling him the devil, all this sort of stuff. And it's not good to see. So you just hope people can get their arms around him and say, mate, just stop being an idiot and focus on your career. But I don't see that happening. So you got to pray for him and hope that he can get his act together and do better, essentially. That's what we really want from these guys. So as we see Ryan Garcia ride around being driven by an orangutan, we see him try stand-up comedy. We watched him play poker with Jimmy Butler and Neymar. We've seen him do all of these things. I have one question. Why isn't Conor Benn allowed to do this? Why is it that Ryan Garcia can fail a test for Osterine and boxing will make every excuse for him, and boxing will say he still beat Devin, he still whooped his ass? Yet Conor Benn's a dirty cheat who should never be allowed to box again. This is a frustration with boxing fans. What's it all about? Does doping matter? Yes or no? Or does it depend on whether you like the person or not? Because I believe Conor Benn and Ryan Garcia should be treated the same way. There's one caveat to them. That's at least Ryan's coughed to it and taken his ban. So Ryan Garcia has literally boxed, won, failed the test, had his thing declared a no contest, copped his ban, and is likely to box before Conor Benn sets foot in a British ring. So someone gave Conor Benn some bunk advice. And it can't be Eddie Hearn, because listen to Hearn in the media now. Hearn's attitude now is maybe Conor Benn should have coughed to it. But his language has changed now. He's now saying Conor believes he is innocent. It's not Hearn saying, I believe he is innocent. And maybe that's Hearn making public a rift that we know exists between those two. So we know for absolute certain that Conor's not happy with the support he's received from Matchroom. He thought they were going to make this all go away. And they've just gone, we can't. You're going to have to cough to it. He's like, it's too late. So what's happening behind the scenes, from what I understand, is they're trying to find a way for everyone to save face in this. So how does Conor cop a ban? How do the board look like they've been tough on anti-doping? And how do UCAD not look stupid because this is a VADA test and not a UCAD test? That's where we're at with that. But I've always felt the treatment of Conor Benn versus other drug cheats has been massively unfair. I think the treatment of Conor Benn as a second-generation boxer has been unfair relative to the other guys. The Hennessy siblings, prime example. Who else has not had a hard time being the son of a former boxer? Even someone like Lee Haskins, but in Lee Haskins' defense, like, his lad is really coming up the hard way. But we never talk about those second-generation talents, do we? In the same way we talk about Conor Benn, in the same way we talk about Campbell Hatton, in the same way we used to talk about Chris Eubank Jr. And I don't understand where that hate comes from. It's almost as if people don't believe they deserve what they have. And it's like, look, they're taking punches to the face. Like, at some point, they're going to earn it if they stick around long enough. But let's box that off now, because I think you guys understand my views on it. I'm slightly concerned about, how we're treating Ryan Garcia as a drug cheat versus how we're treating Conor Benn. But I also understand that boxing is boxing, if we're being brutally honest. And it ain't changing for you and it ain't changing for me. I guess I should focus on Britain again. Just a quick fly through the weekend's shows. I'm trying to catch up on what I could. Matchroom show in Birmingham. I think I said at the time, it's a show that didn't make sense. It's a show that, by the end of it, we're no wiser about anything, if we're being brutally honest. It hasn't moved anyone's career forward. So that's why you saw a very flat Eddie Hearn in the post-fight discussions and interviews, because when you have a card like that, you're literally just giving people summer holiday money. I can't see, what the point was. Like, I don't think Eddie Hearn gets excited by filling out a 4,500 seat arena. And from my understanding, a lot of those tickets were comped. So what it looks like is, when there's a glut of tickets that they haven't sold, they don't give them to boxing fans, because we'll tweet straight away that we got free tickets off Matchroom, right? So they go and find people who don't normally watch boxing, and they go, look, do you want to watch some boxing tonight? Maybe it's a way of converting new fans, and if so, it's great marketing. But just hearing that they're giving these tickets to running clubs, nurses, firefighters, whoever's not connected to boxing, getting these free tickets. And that's how they're padding out their arenas at the moment. So when you look at that card, it's a card of fighters that I don't think Hearn really believes in, but he's probably got to get them out because he's got a contract with them. And it's a nice way to just kind of flush out people you don't really see adding value. And I know people say, yeah, but he had Cameron Vyong, is it Vong on there? I don't think he's sold on him. And I'm not sold on him, to be honest with you. He doesn't seem to have enough power at this point in his career. He doesn't seem able to take people out that other people have taken out. And that's a worry. At this point in his career, you'd expect a lot more stoppages. And I don't want to hear people say, yeah, we're trying to get him the rounds. Because if Jeff Ofori had more belief, and if Jeff Ofori didn't understand the game, right, he could have easily gone after Cameron Vong and really done a number on him. I'm not saying he would have won, but Jeff is the kind of guy who's tough and gnarly enough to make life hell. But I think Jeff did enough to enhance his brand and put the kid over, so credit to him. But yeah, back to the point, a lot of experiments that Hearn doesn't really care about on this card. So let's start with the one that people were talking about, Shannon Ryan versus Emma Dolan. So for context, people don't even understand that Emma Dolan's been grafting in this game a long time. not a person who's multi-time champion and won all this, won all that, but Emma Dolan's always someone who's there or thereabouts. And so you expect her to be okay at the pro level because she's always had to grind. So you know she's not going to cut corners in training, and you know she's going to give 100% in the ring. Added to that, Carl Greaves. Carl Greaves is an important influence. I've sort of talked Carl Greaves to death now, haven't I? But that kind of Leicester scene, that M1 corridor scene, he's a very, very important part of developing that talent from those amateur clubs like Earl Shilton, etc., etc. He's really built something there. Between Leicester, Newark, Nottingham, Derby, he's done great work. So you know Emma Dolan's going to be ready for this fight. Now, we've been here before with people like Shannon Ryan, haven't we? Yeah. If you like him overly saucy and muscled, we had Rosanna Cox for a while, and then that seems to have disappeared, quite rightly too. If you like them a bit more, ladyish and, a bit more page 3 friendly, you had Shannon Courtenay for a while. That wasn't sustainable. We've had Ebony Bridges. But Shannon Ryan seemed to be like a mix of all of that. And, I think she was a 258. She might still be with 258. And I was hearing a lot of noise about Shannon Ryan. Oh, yeah, there's this young girl, Shannon Ryan, in the amateurs. She's doing this, she's doing that. And I'd watch it. I was never convinced. And this isn't me talking about her as a person. I can't judge her as a person. But from a boxing perspective, I never saw it. I remember saying at the time, the only way she's going to make it is if she can find herself a top-notch coaching team that can teach her the game quickly, because that window's closing. And so when she boxed Emma Dolan, I was just looking at someone who didn't look like they'd been boxing for long. And you can tell this because when someone hasn't boxed for a long time, it's all very basic. And you can see that they're having to think their way into situations. And that was the difference between them. Shannon Ryan needed about 2 seconds to work out what to do next. Emma Dolan was just like, I know exactly what I want to do. And that was the gap in class between them. Emma Dolan was always in control of her variables, and I never believed that Shannon Ryan was. So when I see these sorts of situations happen in the ring, and just for the record, Shannon Ryan lost by split decision, which I thought was terrible judging. I thought Emma won that fight comfortably. I believe Emma Dolan probably had more gears she could have gone into, and maybe in a rematch you'll see that. But when I see someone like Shannon Ryan, I try and rationalize how we got to this position, and the only conclusion I can draw is this. When she was starting out in the amateurs, and that would have been like 2019 when she was making a buzz, people saw that opportunity because this is like before Ellie Scotney's really who she is now. This is before anyone. This is kind of that Shannon Courtenay era, right? Where you're not getting the hardcore GB lot coming out en masse. There are no, what's the lady's name? Karis Artingstalls. There's no Lauren Prices. You haven't got, people like Rosie Eccles who will also be on stream at some point. So it was quite a flat talent pool. And so if you had someone like Shannon Ryan, who already had combat experience from like taekwondo, kickboxing and stuff, you're trying to hothouse her to then go, right, we can get her to a world title in 2 or 3 years. Look at the rankings here. This can't be hard. So the pandemic happened. And then that forced a lot of people's hands. Like they might have wanted to stay amateur, but then it's like, well, the only way we're going to get things moving now is to do the pro thing. And then you start to see the Emma Dolans come on stream. And every year when you get these guys come out the amateur system, the standard goes up. And you're dealing with people who have boxed since they were kids. Shannon Ryan hasn't boxed since she was a kid. And Saturday showed that. And when you're in that position and you're trying to learn quickly, you can't have novices in your corner. And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. I'm just saying you can't have a novice in your corner. She needed someone like pick a name, like a Tony Sims, for God's sake. She needed someone like a Joe Gallagher. She needed someone like a Dave Caldwell that was going to get her up to speed quick. But she made the choice that she made, And these are the consequences. I heard some chatterings in and around the scene that people think she's maybe on PEDs. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't also not surprise me if she wasn't. But I can see where that comes from, because we've been here so many times with women in boxing, where we know what women look like when they do a ton of cardio. We know what women look like when they lift a ton of weight. The fat rarely goes. They get strong and they get in better shape, but the fat rarely goes. So I can see why people would see that as a red flag. I will reserve judgment until a test has failed, then I can speak on it a bit more. But my advice to people is, if you don't believe your boxing experience is where it needs to be, and you're trying to do great things, if you don't find a great trainer, you're kind of stuck in the mud. So I don't know what you do if you're Shannon Ryan at this point, because Shannon's not very tall, right? So moving Shannon up to, like, let's say bantamweight or super bantam for fights, she's just going to get blasted. Bear in mind, she got dropped by Emma Dolan in the second round. I am highly confident someone like an Ebony Bridges would do the same thing to her. So at this point, and here's where I've got sympathy for Shannon Ryan, because in her head, she must be like, well, if I got dropped by Emma Dolan, what's going to happen when I jump in with the big fish? Am I going to be able to cope with that? And she's not a kid. Like, Shannon's got to be, 26, 27? So she's got to have an honest conversation with herself about where this is going and what she'd like to achieve. It felt to me like boxing was the precursor to the modeling and the media career. But you kind of have to be good at the boxing thing for that, all of that to tie together. I wish her all the best. I can only comment on what I see. And what I saw there was someone who didn't know how to use their tools, who didn't know how to box. When you're the shorter fighter, why are you not double jabbing? When you're the shorter fighter, why are you walking forward in straight lines? Where are your angles? And, I've talked to people in the sport who said, but she was landing that big right hand. Right hand was hitting shoulders and gloves and forearms, for God's sake. She was kind of landing with what I'd call the supplementary shots, just the shots that you throw just because you can. But yeah, in terms of her, she's got a big rebuilding job to do, some tough questions to answer. I hope she comes back, because, I'm never one to say I want to see someone out the sport. So I wish her all the best. Who else was on that card? We've talked about Cameron Vong, Lewis Crocker and Connor Walker. Sometimes when you get people whose skill sets are really basic, you get a good fight. That's a prime example there. Lewis Crocker had no intention of boxing, just went full Gary Cully, like, I'm just going to stop this guy. You know when you fall in love with your own power and you forget? You had to box really well to make that power actually have an effect. And Lewis Crocker didn't do that, and I thought Connor Walker fought like his life depended on it. What great attitude that guy had. I was impressed with that. I'm happy for him. I think those two should run that straight back. And I'm not really a fan of rematches generally, or immediate rematches. But where else are you going to put either of them? So I have those two run it back, and let's see if Lewis Crocker can be the person we thought he was before this fight, or let's see if Connor Walker can elevate beyond what we thought he could do. But just speaking honestly, kind of happy and proud of him, because when you're fighting at home, especially, you get to put on a performance like that and make your family proud. So credit to him. Then there's just loads of kind of like Muhammad Ali's, etc. Just local kids who got given a gig. We probably won't see them again on big shows. Muhammad Ali got a draw that early in his career against a French kid, and you're like, whatever. So then that brings us swiftly on to the main event, Felix Cash versus Tyler Denny. Now, let's start with the elephant in the room. The Tony Sims gym had a load of really nice kids with good amateur pedigrees, good backstories, right? And then there was a period where the Sims gym was producing monsters. Guys that were getting iced, people that were getting battered. Like, it looked scary. What they were able to do looked scary. Felix Cash, Denzel Bentley, Conor Benn in that crazy run he had against Algeria, etc., Vargas and all those guys. Everyone looked like they were doing damage. Joe Cordina. Everyone looked like they were doing damage. And since Conor Benn's failed the test, No one looks like they're doing damage. Count the defeats. Don't even interpret what I'm saying as anything other than count the defeats. And ask yourself, what's different? Is Tony a different coach? Did they lose a key member of the coaching team? I don't know. But based on that, I never thought Felix Cash would beat Tyler Denny, and definitely not with a year and a half out the ring, and definitely not with 7 fights in 5 years. Cold, hard reality. Activity is your best friend in boxing, and Felix hasn't had that, and he hasn't had consistency. Tyler Denny has. And whatever you want to say about Tyler Denny, he's boxed himself into this kind of form. The cynic in me says what's been happening in Midlands boxing, that all of a sudden these guys are popping, but another conversation for another time. I thought, if you look at that fight, that was just growing into a slow beatdown, because Tyler Denny can do that round after round. I didn't think Felix Cash could keep taking the shots he was taking, and he couldn't throw anything back that did any damage. So that must have been a hard night for Felix Cash, where he realizes he's a shadow of the guy who was boxing during the pandemic. So if you take a second, you're thinking, okay, you can put 2 and 2 together and go, okay, it must be. And maybe it is. But I'm happy for Tyler Denny, because he's made a good defense of that European title with a good name on his record. Not a guy who was cutting corners, because remember, he went to train with Adam Booth, so it's not like he was cutting corners. But I look at that and I go, this is where boxing's at now. It's almost as if you don't take the juice, you can't do the sport, not even at a European level. It brings us back to what we discussed right in the beginning. What do we want as boxing fans? Do we want a clean sport, or do we just want fights? High quality fights. I don't think we're going to get both. But I'm happy for Tyler Denny. I think if I could choose, either he fights Denzel can fight for the European, or do the rematch with Linus Adofia. Can you imagine if Linus went straight from like area level, English level to European level? And he would deserve it, because like I said, there's a guy who is just one of boxing's good guys. So I wish him all the best. Wish all of them all the best. And like I said, can't really jump up and down about that show, because I felt it was transactional. Hearn just had to do something in June, and he did something, and it was a good springboard into this weekend, where you got Bam Rodriguez, Sonny Edwards, Ramla Ali. So you got a stronger Matchroom lineup coming out this weekend. I've also got to talk about the Box Nation show, right? Because obviously I've got the bias, because I know Alfie pretty well. But I wanted to see what one of these Box Nation shows was all about in the flesh. So, I mean, thanks to the guys at Warren Boxing Management, Alfie, Sonny, everyone for looking out for me. Appreciate that. But one thing I will say is, if Friday's show on Box Nation is the standard they're going to set, it's worth tuning in. I'd recommend, actually, if you can catch Friday's fight night, it's worth tuning in, because it's action-packed. I don't like fights where it's like 12 fights in a night and there's maybe one knockdown. Like, people were hitting the canvas. Like, there were some spectacular moments where you're like, oh, Lord. So let's just go through it. I'm just going to go through it in the order I remember. So I'm going to miss some of them, because I was kind of mid-conversation a lot of the time. So there's some of these fights I did miss, but a lot of them I did try and catch. So I'm going to shout out Newman Hussain, good friend and part owner of, what do you call it, the Rival Boxing Gym. So if you're anywhere near Caledonia Road and Barnsbury Station, just shoot out there, walk down the hill a bit. There's a beautiful gym just there. Good people. Jiu-jitsu bit on the floor, on the ground if you wanted, but I wish this made that a full boxing gym, because it would be incredible. So he's obviously, momentum continues. He's got his win, so I'm happy for him. After that, what did I see? Courtney Bennett fought a guy from the Czech Republic. Surname was Pavek, if I remember correctly. Got 2 rounds in, and that Pavek guy couldn't take it. And, you look on BoxRec and Pavek was 320 pounds, and you'll say, he just beat a pudding. True. 100% true. That guy was a pudding, but that guy's taken some stiff shots and gone the distance. What I thought was different this time was Courtney just went to the body, saw that the guy wasn't in the kind of shape he should be, and did what a professional should do, and said, I'm just going to break him down to the body. And some of those right hooks that were going into the belly, I swear he could have spun his rib cage 180 degrees where he was doing that. They were pretty savage shots. They were just getting sunk in because Pavic had a high guard. He wasn't prepared to take those proper heavy headshots, but he ate a few uppercuts, but it was those shots to the body. So end of the second, I think he just said to his corner, man, I don't feel too good. Corner been like, And then he just dropped to his knees and was sick. So Courts moves on. Like, record's looking good. I think maybe one more learning fight. And if you're going to give him a learning fight, then just put him in for the southern area against a peer. If you can find a peer, let's not mention names because it gets contentious. But if you can find a peer, that'd be good for southern area. And then you start looking at guys like Solly Dakers and David Adelaide tail end of this year, early next year. But I'm incredibly optimistic about what Courtney can do. And I love the fact that this is all being done in the shadows. There's a lot of things that don't need to be seen. He needs to be seen on TV when he's ready, when all the kinks are ironed out and he's nailed the formula. Because people don't understand this. As a professional, what you're really trying to do is get probably 3 or 4 punches perfect, that you know that you could throw them with your eyes closed in any situation and land. If you can master 3 or 4 key shots in a fight, you become elite. One of the things I see people struggling with is they either become a one-trick pony or they try and do everything. And because they don't understand their own body and kind of how they respond to things, it can get messy. And I think Courts is on that journey now. There are a few things to work on, and I mean, him and I can discuss those. Don't give away the trade secrets. But I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Raf in his corner. I'm happy for Don in his corner. 2 really good coaches, knowledgeable guys. All they need is a successful case study, and they'll have a full gym. So 100% in support of that. Jack McGann did his thing, got his stoppage, so it looks like he's back on the right path again. So I'm happy for Jack. I know Warren Boxing Management have really high hopes for him at middleweight, and middleweight's a division that's popping at the moment. So why not get him in the middle of that mix? Who else did we win? There was a fight, and it might have been Kurt Wiggins, right? Where one of the maddest fights I've seen. So Kurt Wiggins gets dropped in the first round, and we think, it's all over. Seemingly just shook off getting dropped and just ground his way to... did he get points win or a draw? I can't remember. I think it was a draw. He ground his way to a draw, and I thought that was a pretty impressive performance. Because after that first round, it was like, this guy's done. So credit to him for that fighting spirit. I don't know if you want to be going that deep on your debut. So what's his ceiling? Only time will tell, but you shouldn't have to be digging into the reserves that early in your career. And then, what else did I watch? We'll come on to the main event next. Well, not next, but after. I can remember who else was there. We've done Jack McGann. What's the kid's name? For Trevor Palmer. Farington, that's it. See, I'm not even going to edit that out, guys. So you understand sometimes I'm trying to remember stuff. That might have been one of the nastiest stoppages I've seen in a long, long time. So these guys fight. And first round, Trevor Palmer looks all right. He looks good, composed, can box well as a southpaw. But there's a point in the fight, and if you watch it on Box Nation, you'll see. I don't know if he spins around, but he's definitely distracted by something. And he cops a heavy shot from Farington. And it was nasty. And I was like, he ain't going to recover from that. Came out the round after and just got flattened. Now, part of me was like, do you just pull him out after that? Because he wasn't recovered. You could just tell he wasn't going to recover from that. And the next hard shot he took, that was him out. And it's not good to see that. It looks great on TV, but when you see that, you think, that's another human being, man. And that's going to take something out of him. So I wish him all the best. He's a talented kid, but he's probably going to be a B-side guy for a while until he can figure out how to get some wins. But he's with Roy Connor, so he should be all right in the long term. Now, Roy knows his stuff. Roy's not really a guy you want to question. So as always, good luck to him. And then the main event, Casey Kademi, the Afghan warrior, versus Ryan Farag. I'm only in trouble for saying this, but I was asked about who wins this, and I said I lean towards Farag. I'll always lean towards the guy that's been there before, just because of the fact that he's had to solve more problems, and his approach is battle tested more. Whereas I thought with Casey, it was he might get lucky, and it was just an experience thing for me. And so if you do watch the fight on Box Nation, you'll see Casey comes with the normal style, like leaping in, leaping out, getting those big shots in. And what I loved about Ryan Farag's approach was he just stuck to what he was always going to do. He said, I'm going to stick to my boxing. He's going to slow down to a position where I can get to him. And that's what happened in the second half of that fight, where Ryan Farag was able to start getting him. And I don't know what it looked like on TV, but I was there when I was talking to the guys that sat next to me. I was trying to explain to them. Farag was doing loads of really clever things up close. Like he was able to get his uppercuts off. He was able to get little chopping shots to the body that Kademi was reacting to. And it looked like Casey Kademi hadn't really understood that as you move up the levels, guys can just see the openings and go for them. So your best bet is actually to be super conservative to begin with, then open up, whereas he went the other way. And I was impressed with Farag because he was dogged in his approach, but he was good at counter left hooks. He was good at those counter right uppercuts. There was a point where I saw him slide back on his back leg and just throw the uppercut as Kademi was falling in. I was like, levels. Sometimes in boxing, it's just levels. And so when I saw that Ryan had won, and I think it was unanimous, and it was quite rightly so, I saw people saying, Casey Kademi should call it a day. I'm like, why? His style's exciting. Like, as long as he can avoid guys like Farag, who can be calm in the eye of the storm, there's some big wins that will come his way, because he's going to catch somebody on the right day at the right time, and that's going to be his win. So I hope he carries on, because there's a lot of hope for him. So that was the in-ring action. In terms of the overall, they brought out the Queensbury big guns. So Andy Clark was there. I think it was Raven Chapman. I never really know. Dev was there, obviously. Dev looking sharp. I can't pull off what he wears because it's very Dev, whereas I'm more belt and braces, to be honest with you. The Gad was there. And so I hadn't spoken to the Gad in a while. And I know a lot of people give Gareth A. Davis stick, but off camera, you forget that he's a really knowledgeable boxing guy. And I know me and Porky don't agree on this, but I don't think he's a bad guy at all. I think Gareth A. Davis is a guy who, when the cameras come on, understands that he's got to stay in the limelight to pay his bills. So I can understand that. But he is really knowledgeable, decent guy. Who else was there? Umar was there, obviously, now that he's with Box Nation. He looked sharp, double-breasted, was a good look for him. And who else? Yeah, it was good. Alfie looking sharp, man. Don't think I've seen him suited up like that before. Alfie was definitely looking sharp. He enjoyed it. So I think he puts it down as a success. I'd like to see more people kind of come down to these events. And I understand that they're not cheap, so before anyone jumps down my throat. But these are the events that you're going to get the fights you want. I think once things get televised, there's a risk, because now at that point you're committing money to people. But I think on these sorts of shows, you can take a few more risks because you're trying to create an entertaining product in the building and on screen. And you can take a few more risks. And I hope we see more people attend these events, because these are good fighters. A lot of these guys are good fighters. Like, you're going to see Masood Abdullah on one of these shows. Hopefully they'll get him like a British title shot. He deserves one. Just a load of class. You got Amy Andrew. All these people, Hannah Rankin might come on the platform. So there are some decent names they can get on these platforms. And I'd say the same regarding Warren Boxing Management as I'd say about Steve Goodwin shows, as I'd say about GBM shows. Let's try and get these to fill up and just be rocking. One of the things I was really tempted to do, and I've got to think this through, is how do you create an identifier that someone can wear to say, yeah, he listens to the pod? Because can you imagine going to a show and you could just tell if someone goes to the bar, maybe it's a wristband, maybe it's whatever. And then it's just like, oh, you listen to the pod too? Yeah, yeah. Now you guys can start talking. It becomes more social. And that's going to be the challenge, I think. How do you make boxing more social? I'm sure there's a brand out there somewhere. No, but serious question. How do you make boxing more social? How do you do it so that if you're going to have a Friday show, we can knock off work 4 o'clock, 4:30, maybe go down, have a couple of drinks with people, have a little chat about the fight. Everyone goes in and it's a bit more social. It feels a bit more social as opposed to that kind of brothel feel where you go in, watch your boxing and leave. You know, you kind of feel like, well, apart from the boxing, I didn't do much else. So that's a question for far smarter people than me, but I'd like to be part of that solution. My voice is starting to go, guys. So forgive me for tapping out now. You've got 40 odd minutes out of me. So that's enough. But yeah, decent weekend of boxing on a personal level. The Garcia Haney thing, I think we need to put that to bed now. We need to start moving on to September 21st, which is going to be Joshua versus Dubois. Surprised that DAZN are telling you that's what you're going to get. Like when you cancel, they say, look, you're going to get Joshua Dubois September 21st. And it hasn't been officially announced. And this is more proof that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing at DAZN. And on that note, I'll say take care, guys.
Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com.